So farts in space, basically in weightlessness, hot air doesn't rise. So the good thing is you probably won't smell your own fart because by the time you've done it, it's already been taken away by the air conditioning system. Hi, I'm Tim Peake, a British astronaut, and I flew to the International Space Station in 2015, 2016 and spent 6 months living on board. I'm here today to answer the questions in the honesty box. So these have been anonymously sent in, so here goes. First question, were you prepared to die to travel to space? Oh, that's a good question. Every astronaut who gets on the rocket has to consider the, what could happen, the catastrophic implications of a rocket destroying itself or blowing up during launch, or re-entry, or spacewalking, or any of the other hazardous things we do in space. So it's fair to say that any astronaut has already thought about that and considered it. I've been doing that all my career. As a test pilot, I would go on high-risk test sorties where you just didn't know how the aircraft was going to perform. And so I've always approached these things from a point of risk mitigation. I look at what I'm doing, what could go wrong, and what could I do about it? And then I try and prepare as best as possible. So training, make sure that I do everything possible if anything were to happen catastrophically. But yes, everybody has to contemplate that. Have you ever pooed? Oh, have you ever pooed your spacesuit? Okay, very sophisticated questions here. Have you ever pooed your spacesuit, and what happens to farts in space? No to the first, and I'll answer the second in a second. Really, you really don't want to be considering pooing your spacesuit. That's very bad. But let's dig into it. It's a good question. On launch day, you're going to have many hours in your spacesuit before you actually get to the space station. So what we actually start the day off with is an enema. And you're actually offered different types of enema. I've got no idea what the different. I flew from Russia, from Kazakhstan with the Russians, and so they said you can have an American enema or a Russian enema. Didn't know the difference, but I was in Russia, so do what the Russians do. But yeah, so you start the day with a shower where they scrub you down, antibacterial soap, so you don't carry any bacteria or viruses up to the space station. You have an enema to clean you out, and that should stop you from having any desire to go for a poo for at least 24 to 48 hours. So launch day and the day after should be absolutely fine. What we actually wear under our spacesuits is what they call a MAG. It's effectively a nappy, but NASA like to give everything an acronym, and nappy's not very cool for astronauts to wear, so it's a MAG, Maximum Absorbency Garment. So it's an adult nappy. What happens to farts in space? So farts in space, basically in weightlessness, hot air doesn't rise. So the good thing is you probably won't smell your own fart because by the time you've done it, it's already been taken away by the air conditioning system. And the air conditioning system on the space station is pretty good. And it's good, it's not there to just stop you from smelling farts. It's there to stop you from losing consciousness, because if you didn't have a good air conditioning system, what would happen every time we breathe out? We're breathing out carbon dioxide. And so if you didn't have air moving around, and if you were working, for example, for a couple of hours at a laptop in one location, this bubble of carbon dioxide would just build around you and it wouldn't go anywhere. And so you'd start to get CO2 poisoning from your own asphyxiation. So a fart would just hang there in space if it didn't have the good air conditioning system. Wow, that's a long answer to pooing and farting. Rank the planets in order from best to worst. Okay, so let's start with Earth. I think we'd all agree that we're happy breathing, we're happy being alive, and we've got a lovely sun that most of the time keeps us at a relatively comfortable temperature. Second favourite is Mars. I love Mars. Mars used to have a liquid ocean. About 3 billion years ago, Earth and Mars were very similar. It's got the largest volcano in the solar system. It's got the biggest canyon in the solar system. Mars is geologically fascinating and a brilliant planet. After Mars, Saturn's my favourite. I mean, it's just the most beautiful planet in the solar system with the rings, and it's iconic. If you ask a child, draw a planet, chances are it'll be Saturn. After Saturn, I think Jupiter, stunning planet again, a gas giant, biggest planet in the solar system, the great red spot, the hurricane. We're probably going to go to Neptune, because Neptune is right out there on the furthest extremes of the solar system, but it's a lovely deep blue. It's a beautiful blue. It's kind of known as the second blue planet in the solar system after Earth. Then let's go to Venus. Poor old Venus used to be really, really nice, I think. Again, a few billion years ago. Probably a good place to go on holiday, not anymore. Runaway greenhouse gas has gone out of control, massive carbon dioxide atmosphere, hottest planet in the solar system, about 460 degrees Celsius on the surface. You just wouldn't survive on Venus for very long at all. Then let's go to Mercury, and then all the way back out to the last planet then, which is Uranus. I don't think there's much exciting about Uranus. It feels really bad, isn't it, to say so? But when Voyager 2 passed by Uranus, it was kind of a bit of a bland, pale blue planet. It wasn't very exciting. It was very cold, about minus 240 degrees Celsius. So that's the order of my planets. Is space food gross? I suppose it depends on your definition of gross. But if you're a foodie, then you're going to be bitterly disappointed with space food. There are a couple of things that they do to space food that makes it particularly unpalatable. First thing is they remove a lot of the salt content, because salt's not good for our bone density loss. It does tend to be anything that could just be rehydrated, or like camping food, that irradiated food you get in foil packets or tins of food. I mean, I didn't mind it. I'm not a foodie. I'm not food motivated, and it never bothered me, space food. And you can take up about 10% of what we call bonus food, which are goodies off the shelf. And as long as it's got a good shelf life and it passes the space flight criteria, then you can fly a few off-the-shelf items up there. Do you think space travel is ethical? That's a good question. Do you think space travel is ethical? Yes, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be passionate about what we're doing and why we're doing it. The universe is a big place, a really big place. Just the Milky Way alone. I mean, it's 100,000 light years side to side, 200 billion stars in the Milky Way. We will probably never get close to exploring even a fraction of the Milky Way. And that's one galaxy and possibly 2 trillion galaxies out there in the observable universe. It's vast. It's absolutely vast, the universe. The scale of it is mind-boggling. So why should we restrict ourselves to one small planet? I think space travel is very exciting. It offers the potential to learn huge amounts of information. It offers the potential to discover more. The science that we're learning about space exploration helps us back here on Earth. We're developing vaccines for viruses, drugs for diseases, new methods of energy transformation techniques, carbon dioxide removal, water purification, all these things that are going to help us solve the problems that we have back here on Earth. So I'm a huge believer in space exploration in order that we can use our planet for as long as possible. Elon or Branson or Bezos? Elon. Why? Because, and this is nothing against Branson or Bezos, as I mentioned, some of the things that are happening in the commercial sector, suborbital space transportation systems, etc., are really interesting and could be very, very game-changing in the future. But right now, what SpaceX are doing is phenomenal. They are, to say they've disrupted the space sector is a massive understatement. It used to cost about $57,000 on the space shuttle to launch to space, and now on a Falcon 9, a Falcon Heavy, you'll get that for probably less than $3,000 per kilogram. Starship is going to bring that down another order of magnitude. So what they're doing is making it cheaper and easier to get into space, and they're offering huge cargo payloads, hundreds of tons to low Earth orbit. That opens the door to some really exciting, innovative prospects. For example, getting solar energy from space is something that would be clean, limitless energy for all of us back here on Earth, a bit like nuclear fusion. But you can't build a solar farm in space. It's prohibitively expensive. What Starship does is it brings it into an economically viable range where actually building a massive solar farm in space using Starship is, you can put forward the business case. It's economically viable. You can get the payload up there, and you can start thinking about, potentially building, solar farms in space, clean, limitless energy, these kinds of things. So they are far, far more advanced in terms of what they're doing for space exploration than Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin, so Branson and Bezos. What physical changes does your body undergo in space? Lots of physical changes. The first 5 weeks, your body's pretty much in overdrive. What's happening? So first thing you notice is all the fluid in your legs, all your blood volume, basically, all the body fluid that's normally in your legs and ankles, because we're standing and sitting most of the time on Earth, all shifts up to your chest and face. So you become puffy-faced. Your brain doesn't like that, gives you a bit of a headache. So you start losing that blood volume. That causes you to lose weight. So you lose about 5 kilograms in your first 5 weeks. You start losing bone density, and your muscles atrophy because you're not using your bones and muscles as much in space either. Cardiovascular system changes, and even your eyesight changes as well. Your immune system becomes more depleted. Things like your airway even gets inflamed. So your body's going through all these changes. But actually, your body is doing the right thing. Our human body is amazing. What it's doing is it's trying to make you into the perfect human being for living in space. We try and stop that because we want to come back to Earth. And so we exercise for 2 hours every day to try and keep ourselves fit and healthy, but not fit and healthy for space, fit and healthy for coming back into a gravity environment. So yeah, going to space and coming back is punishing on the body, and that's why we exercise. Are astronauts well paid? Okay, astronauts are effectively government employees. As a European Space Agency astronaut, we are employed, there are about 27 member states that make up the European Space Agency, so it's like a European governmental organisation. So we're paid at the same kind of salary scale as civil servants. I mean, we're not there with sports players, football stars, all the rest of it. It's a decent salary. It's a good level of civil servant salary. What's your favourite sci-fi film, and which is closest to reality? One of my favourite space films is Apollo 13, but it's not really sci-fi because it happened and it was very close to reality, and the film is brilliant and accurate. So sci-fi film, I'll probably say The Martian is my favourite. I liked Interstellar as well. It was a brilliant film. But The Martian, great fun film. Matt Damon's a brilliant actor, very funny. It was quite close to the book, Andy Weir's novel. Scientifically pretty accurate as well. Andy Weir's novel was very accurate. The Martian gets a little bit Hollywood at the end, flying through space with a glove ripped. But hey, Hollywood's there to entertain us. It doesn't always have to be factually correct. Should billionaires be allowed to travel to space? Should billionaires be allowed to travel to space? That's another good question. I think that when we look at space tourism and what's happening with commercial suborbital space travel, it might be useful to think back to aviation in the 1920s, 1930s, those pioneering days of flying and those first flights across the Atlantic. And that was really only accessible to really high net worth individuals who could pay to fly across the Atlantic in 1930, for example. Now, if you said, what kind of percentage of the population could afford to fly across the Atlantic, it's much, much greater. Many people just consider that an ordinary holiday. I think in 100 years' time, we'll be thinking of some form of space transportation in the same way. The cost of that travel is going to come down and down and down, and it won't just be billionaires flying to space, it will become accessible to a much greater percentage of the population. The other interesting thing is the kind of suborbital flights that are going on right now, they're just launching and landing at the same location, popping up into space, a few minutes of weightlessness, popping back down again. There's no reason why you couldn't launch in Texas, but rather than landing in Texas, land in Europe, for example. That suborbital trajectory is a point-to-point transportation system around the world. So potentially this is actually paving the way for a new form of travel that could get you from London to Sydney in 40 minutes, for example, in 50 years' time. Do you think anyone has ever had sex in space? Good question. I think on the shuttle, I might be wrong here, but I think there may have been a married couple on the shuttle that have been in space. Not to say that they had sex whilst they're in space, but I think that there has been the opportunity, shall we say. So do you think anyone's ever had sex in space? Not sure. Do I think that people will have sex in space? Absolutely. Space is opening up at a commercial level. We will potentially have people, vacating on orbital hotels in space in maybe 50, 100 years' time. So if it hasn't already happened, it will do. That'll be the 400-kilometre Mile High Club. What's your favourite alien character from film or TV? For me, going to watch E.T. on the big screen was a huge moment. I still remember it. My father took me, an amazing film, and I just think E.T. is brilliant. So I'd have to say, out of all the space films I've watched, E.T. wins it. Do you have a favourite thing to do in zero gravity? I think for me in zero gravity, it's a bit like any sport. You get better and better and better at it the more that you do it. And so after a month in zero gravity, your kind of somersaults and your spins are pretty good. After 2 months, you can fly yourself down the space station without actually hitting any of the walls, and you get faster and faster, and it becomes more and more fun. But on Friday nights, we would tend to gather together as a crew up in the Russian segment, have a meal together, all bring some of our bonus food and share it round. Really nice sociable occasion, talk about the week that we'd had. But the competition on a Friday night was who could throw an American football the length of the space station. So from Russian segment all the way down to the front end of the US segment without it hitting any of the walls. Might sound easy, but there's a kink there. As you go from the Russian segment to the American segment, it goes kind of off axis for a bit. Really hard to do. Scott Kelly had been up there for 8 months when I got on board the space station, and I think he was the only person I saw actually do it really cleanly.
Were you any good at it?
Was I any good at it? Not bad. After 6 months, I think I got it. I did it once. Not quite as well as Scott, but at least I got it through the gap. The other thing, actually, just to follow up on that question, there's a toy box on board the space station. I didn't know about that until a couple of months into my mission when I was looking for some Alka-Seltzer tablets to do a demonstration of when it all fizzes up in water. And I'd run out. And so I asked one of the crewmates and they said, go to the toy box. There are some more in there. I was like, what's the toy box? And they said, that showed me where this bag was on board the space station. And I looked in there and not only were there Alka-Seltzer, there was a basketball, there was a hoop. There were 4 Nerf guns in there as well. And that was a lot of fun, having a Nerf gun battle on board the space station. Is Pluto a planet? I'd like to say yes, but it's not really a planet. When you look at the true definition of a planet, its size and has it cleared its own orbital path, you can't really include Pluto as a planet, so sorry, no.
Because Mercury is way too hot. Venus is horrendously hot, and 90 atmospheres pressure and sulfuric acid rain, it melts lead on the surface, right? So you're not going there. And the rest of them are made of gas, so you're not going there either. So Mars is the only place beyond Earth that we could feasibly ever go a planet.